Cue to get started this morning. So, we are going to be picking up right where we left off last time. Minor prophet Amos. If you see Obadiah, you've turned too far, and, we should be right behind Joel. So, just to kind of, get our minds rolling kind of where we were last time, what we did is we walked through Amos 1 and most of Amos 2, watching God call out these nations for judgment, right? And you get 7 in total before we got to where we will end it off, right? And what God is doing is, and I threw this up there last week, like I said, I don't know how well you can see it, but he's circling out Israel for judgment geographically. He literally surrounds Israel in judgment. And we got to chapter 2, we kind of started talking through it a little bit, where, God surrounds Israel in judgment. And we walked through 6 through 8, but let's rewind a little bit. Let's read those again so we can kind of get the full picture of what God says to Israel here. So can I get somebody to read verses 6 through 8? Chapter 2.
Thus says the Lord, the 3 transgressions of Israel, and for 4, I will not turn away his punishment, because they sell the righteous for silver, and the poor for a pair of sandals. They pan after the dust of the earth, which is on the head of the poor, and pervert the way of the humble. And a man and his father go into the same girl, defile my holy name, and lie down by every altar, clothes taken and pledged, and drink the wine of the condemned in the house of their God. Verse 9, right?
No, just through 8. So, we just see a quick outline of all the things Israel's done, right? And we talked about this a good bit last week, right? They've trampled the poor, sold the righteous, broken covenants, abused the house of God. I mean, they've just, on every fundamental level of the people they were called to be, they've done the opposite. And not just it's not a thing where they didn't just do nothing, right? It's one thing to, not do what you're supposed to do. It's another thing to intentionally do the exact opposite. And they're doing the exact opposite. But this picks us up to where we left off last time, which brings us to verses 9 and 10. Can somebody read those for me this morning?
Yet it was not under the Amorite, his height was like the height of cedars, and was strong as the oaks. Yet I destroyed his fruit from above, and his roots from beneath. Also I brought you up from the land of Egypt, and led you 40 years through the wilderness, to possess the land of the Amorite.
So, verses 9 and 10 are this historical allusion to the conquest and, the Exodus, right? Because throughout the minor prophets, we've seen the Exodus is one of these big events in, their history. I mean, as it should be, right? It is God miraculously saving them from Egypt, from slavery, from captivity. It's actually kind of the defining story of their relationship with it. It's how the minor prophets use it a lot. And we see here God's making the point. You only survived because I let you. The only thing that kept you alive was my provision and my grace to you. And it's done. You don't have I think of it this way a lot, like athletes get brand sponsorships and those kind of things. God's kind of saying that, you don't have a sponsorship for me anymore. It's over. It's done. All those things I've done for you, don't expect it anymore. And he said, just look to your history. If I can destroy the Amorite, I can destroy you. Because I saved you from them. So, before we bump on to the next little chunk here, anything on this couple verses? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is kind of an allusion to how they refer to these people in the land as They're giants. How are we to do it? And God's saying, yeah, you didn't. I did. And even here, he's pointing that out. You were scared, and I handled the problem. I'm not going to do it. Anything else on these couple verses? Jeff?
Is it this group of people that they said we didn't kick them out because their iniquity is not yet full? Was that the Amorites or was it somebody else?
It's Canaanites generally, yeah. I can't remember off the top of my head.
I'm trying to Google it, but my phone won't.
Well, if you find an answer, let me know.
The judgment on the nations is all happening at once. It happened as they reach the point where they
Yeah, you're right. It's not happening all at once. I mean, think about it. Like, after this book, we're hopping into Obadiah, and Obadiah focuses on, well, Edom's judgment. And you're right, God does judge these nations when they hit the point that it needs to happen. Anything else?
Oh, here. Genesis 15:16. It's the Amorites.
Okay. I'll have to look into that a little more. Anything? Okay. If not, can somebody read 11 and 12?
Then I raised up some of the sons of the prophets and some of the young men to be Nazarite. Is this not, O sons of Israel, declares the Lord, that you made the Nazarite drink wine, and you commanded the prophets, saying, you shall not prophesy.
So these couple verses just show how far this depravity, how far this sin has, come, how bad they've let it get. So, verse 11, right? I raised up some of your sons as prophet and some of your young men as Nazarites. Is this not the case? Like he's saying, look, this is what I've done, right? I've raised these men up. I've set these group apart to be extra, overly devoted to me. This kind of the point of a Nazarite vow is this great devotion to God. And then verse 12, you made Nazarites drink wine. You made them do it. You made them break that devotion. And you told prophets not to prophesy. I mean, this is just a fundamental breakdown of how all this is supposed to work. One, if somebody devotes themselves to the Lord, especially in a way like Nazarites, where it's meant to be extreme, it's meant to really stand out and show that, this is relationship with God, and you force them to break that? Yeah, that's awful. It's horrible. And then telling a prophet not to prophesy. And this is just the easiest way I've come to explain it. Not saying preachers are prophets, but that's like somebody getting up here to preach and us saying, no, don't do that. No, get down, stop. We don't do that here. Which just defeats the entire purpose of why we're here. That's what they're doing on a fundamental level. They're stopping everything God has given them to build relationship with them, to show them relationship, and saying, we don't do that here. When that was the entire point of them being a nation. Those things he just alluded to, the conquest and the Exodus, the point of those things was to build relationship with God. And here they are taking it another step further, denying ways to build relationship with him. Anything else on these couple verses? Patrick.
In a couple of chapters, they're going to tell Amos, don't do it, right? In Amos chapter 7, if you turn over there, beginning in verse 10, they go and tell the king, hey, this guy, we can't listen to him, right? The land is not able to bear all of his words. And so verse 12, O seer, go, flee away to the land of Judah, eat bread there, and prophesy there, right? That was the whole idea. If you want to prophesy, what you're saying is great if you go say it to Judah. It was great when you were saying it to all of these lands around, but now you focus on it, we don't want to hear it, right? Go prophesy. So this is not just something that God said they were doing. They're demonstrating that they're still doing
Yeah.
this particular instance. And they actually call him that funky word, right? They call him a seer there. So
Yeah, it's not from a place of like lack of understanding. They understand. I mean, when we get there, I mean, they just tell Amos to go home. Go talk to your own people. Don't rock our ship. Don't rock our boat. We're okay. You just go home. And even here, you see that they demonstrate that attitude in this book later on. Anything else on these couple verses? If not, let's finish out chapter 2. Can I get somebody to read 13 through 16?
So I will make you run like a wagon loaded down with sheaves of grain. Your fastest runners will not get away. The strongest among you will become weak. Even mighty warriors will be unable to save themselves. The archers will not stand their ground. The swiftest runners won't be fast enough to escape. Even those riding horses won't be able to save themselves. On that day, the most courageous of your fighting men will drop their weapons and run for their lives, says the Lord.
These verses just show this judgment that's being brought out. And it's pretty simple. Israel's going to be crushed in battle to a point where soldiers' strengths fail, their speed's going to fail, and they're just going to flee naked. I mean, this is complete and utter defeat. Like, it's one thing in battle to retreat and be defeated that way. It's another thing to run away naked. I mean, that's just, you talk about demoralizing. And that's how God says he's going to defeat them and judge them and crush them. It's going to be complete and utter failure on their part. And they will flee. And that is the Lord's declaration. This is when that line pops up, this is the Lord's declaration. It's pretty much a statement of, and this is how it's going to happen. It's done. This is it. Game over. So, anything on this little chunk here?
Various translations have the New American Standard, verse 13 says, "Behold, I weighted down beneath you, as a wagon is loaded down when filled with shears." That sounds like it's applying not only to God, and if it is, it would be like, I've just been dragging this wagon all the time, and I'm not getting anywhere with this wagon. It's pointless. If it applies to people, of course, they feel complete.
Mm-hmm.
But this, the way it reads here, sounds like God saying, I've been dragging this weighted down wagon, and
Mm-hmm.
it's totally unsuccessful.
There's a little bit of debate on the translation of that verse, and it's the thing. Either way, it reads one of two ways. Either God, like you said, that God's been pulling them along the whole time, and He's tired of doing it. He's frustrated with them, and therefore, here we go. Or, I'm going to crush you like a wagon full of grain. It's going to roll you right over. I mean, think about it. Wagon full of grain comes running down that aisle at me right now, and it hits me. Yeah, I'm not going to be okay after, to say the least. I'm going to be flat. And that's what God says either way. Either he's frustrated of carrying them like that wagon, or he's going to crush them like that wagon. Either way, it's over. They are done.
And you probably mean this, but carrying him, I think, is in, if it's God, that, just their sin, just putting up with them not fulfilling the covenant, and he's just had enough of it. He's obviously not tired or anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. He's frustrated with their continual sin and rebellion, really. I mean, just kind of bumping back in the book, in the chapter here, I mean, think about it. He's gone to supernatural means for them over and over and over to help fix their sin, fix the problem, fix the separation from him. Exodus, think of all the things that happened in the wilderness, all the miraculous things there. Think of anything, basically from Genesis chapter 1 up to now. And he's frustrated. They are a rebellious people still. And here we are. Anything else on these couple verses? All right. Well, we're going to be in chapter 3. which for me is one of my favorite chapters in this book. I think it does an interesting thing you don't get a lot. But we'll get there in just a moment. Can I get somebody to read verses 1 and 2 of chapter 3?
Hear this word that the Lord has spoken against your people of Israel, against the whole family that I brought up out of the land of Egypt. You only have one eye in all the families of the earth. Therefore I will punish you for your iniquity.
So, verses 1 and 2, Mark Amos declaring judgment against Israel and gives a reason why. Because this seems particularly harsh. Because think about it. We went through chapters 1 and 2, and God gives these short, declarations of judgment to each of these nations. And then you hit the back half of chapter 2, and it's just Israel, 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 Israel. And think about it. You're that Israelite. We talked about it last week, right? You've been agreeing with this sermon the whole time. You've been agreeing with Amos is saying, and then he turns and points it at you. And then he just goes on a 10-verse tirade on you. And you're kind of like, why us? Well, I think here is the answer. Chapter 3, verse 2. I have known only you out of all the clans of the earth. They were God's chosen people. They were to be a nation of priests, to show the world relationship with God. And since they were that people, they're going to be judged due to that status. Because even Judah got a chunk of this, right? Because when we got to their judgment, the seventh judgment there at the middle of chapter 2, it's because of their covenant unfaithfulness that they're judged. Not for their crimes or things like God outlined with other nations. And he's saying, Israel, you have the same problem. And that's why I'm judging you now. Because I chose you. I did something with you. I elected you for something. And you have failed that mission. Any thoughts on this?
They were God's chosen people, and he was holding them accountable. And I was just going to emphasize just the accountability of God's chosen people. And whether you're Christians living in the first century, whether you're Christians living in the 21st century, or whether you're the Israelites living in the whatever BC this is, 600?
Yeah.
I don't know.
6, 7.
That's a rough guess. But anyway, at the end of the day, you're accountable for your iniquities.
Mhm.
I'm just going to highlight that.
Yeah, they have their choices they made, and they're accountable for their choices. Jeff?
The verses that Patrick referred to, there's a phrase in chapter 7:13 that I always like. Prophesy not again any more at Bethel, for it is the king's chapel, and it is the king's court. They were making their king happy. I mean, this is exactly what the kings of Israel wanted, was for them to not worship God. So by following their government, they were about to be destroyed.
They chose somebody else to, lead them. And you see where that's, leading them. And yeah, it does end up kind of being a discussion there in chapter 7, right? And chapter 7 kind of frames a lot of what Amos says in the book, because you realize they're questioning even Amos this whole time. Because I think, especially this chapter, you kind of see that they've questioned, why would you speak against us, right? And, verse 2 gives a good reason. Well, I chose you. I know I've said this in here before, but it seems, at least to me, reading New Testament, Old Testament, Israel thought they were chosen or elected, however you want to put it, for salvation. Like, because God chose us, we're good. It's not how that was working. God chose them for service unto him. Now, in that relationship with him, salvation could come, but it's fundamentally, they were chosen to serve him, to obey him, to show the rest of the world what a relationship with him could look like. That's why they're a priesthood. And they got it mixed up somewhere along the way. And even here, God's making the point. I didn't choose you to save you. I chose you to serve me. Because relationship with me brings that salvation. And, they failed that. They've failed in their service.
People might be failing in your mission, rebelling against God and doing contrary to His will at every point. And look back to God, the covenant has two parts. God honored His part,
Mm-hmm.
delivered Israel,
Mm-hmm.
failed Israel in their part, and it was deliberately
Mm-hmm.
disrespecting God and going against what God had commanded. So it wasn't malaise. It was openly
Mm-hmm.
turning against God.
Yeah, it's an active turn, right? It's not like it's like they didn't just not do it; they actively went against it, right? And that's a big part of Hosea. Is like God upheld His end of the covenant. Where's yours? Oh, wait, you mean you did the exact opposite? Seems to see the same problem here in Amos. Anything else? Well, the next few verses are interesting. Can I get somebody to read verses 3 through 8?
Do two walk together unless they have agreed to meet? Does a lion roar in the forest when he has no prey? Does a young lion cry out from its den if it has taken nothing? Does a bird fall in a snare on the earth when there is no trap for it? Does a snare spring up from the ground when it has taken nothing? Is a trumpet blown in a city and the people are not afraid? Does disaster come to a city unless the Lord has done it? For the Lord God does nothing without revealing His secret to His servants the prophets. The lion has roared, who will not fear? The Lord God has spoken, but who can prophesy?
So, this is a series of rhetorical questions. You don't get this a ton. Like these rhetorical, it's almost a poem, it seems, the way it kind of flows. And I think the point about it is Amos's need to prophesy there at the end. Why is Amos even talking? Right? Like we brought up chapter 7 a couple times. I think this is a direct correlation. Amos here is saying, this is why I'm talking. Right? And there's several things to note here. This is interesting, to say the least. The first is right there in verse 3. The agreeing to meet, or however your translation renders that verse, right? The walking together, agreeing to meet. The Hebrew here is not trying to convey like, oh, hey, I'm just showing up, shaking your hand, say, hey, nice to meet you. That's not what it's trying to, I guess, say. There's not a good way to put it in English, really. What it's trying to say is agreement to terms. To agreeing to meet together on terms, to come together in agreement. And he's saying, can two walk together if they haven't done that? No.
A better word to use is two walk together if they have not made a covenant. And there is a covenant between God and Israel. God kept His word of covenant. Israel, pretty much from all the way to Egypt on, did not keep the covenant.
Mm-hmm. It is covenant-like language. Yeah.
What do you think? Everybody in this room is a new covenant, right? And you just said two walk together, they're not in agreement. We preach, show me your faith through your works, right? But you don't see a lot of works coming from the church sometimes. I don't mean you're this way to judge them as a whole. So it kind of is, like you said before, going through these prophets, we think we're not like them, but we're so much like them.
The commentary on Israel is a commentary on us.
Yeah.
And it's the same, it's no different. I mean, we have to agree to terms with God. I put my faith in you, and therefore my faith should lead me to do all these things. And if my faith doesn't lead me to do all these things, are we in agreement? It's a good question. Anything else? Okay, Patrick or here.
Here in this example here and others all through the prophets,
Mhm.
presenting something before a trial where an outcome is going to render a judgment.
Yeah, it is very court-like, especially once we hit Micah. I mean, that's literally the stage Micah sets up. He's like, welcome to court, and God's judge, jury, and executioner. And Amos has some similar language here, some similar ideas flowing through, especially this, right? He's walking you through the logic of it, like a lawyer would do. Patrick, do you?
Well, the only thing is that idea, there's part of the idea of agreeing to meet, it's that there's a sincerity that's involved in it. It's also a term that can be used of somebody who reveals themselves, right? So it's you can be with somebody and not know who they are, and then all of a sudden they reveal who they are, and you're like, I can't believe that we're together because we don't really get along, right? So there's a masking where people can seem like they're walking together, but one person really is hiding something. So they're really not in agreement because there's something hidden in one or both of the people that have made this supposed agreement. And so when we talk about this in terms of like making covenants and things like that, there's a sincerity that's at the bottom of it. And that I can't answer for you. I can see what you're doing, and based on what you're doing, I can think, oh, he must think this way. But until you actually are sincere and open, I don't know except by looking at your actions.
Yeah, and that's a good way to kind of put it. It's like, has there been sincerity in this relationship? Because obviously, God makes it very clear, I've been very sincere with you. I have really revealed myself to you. And that's why you get all these allusions to all these things God has done throughout the entire minor prophets, because that's God's point. Look what I've done. I've showed myself to you. I've upheld my end of this agreement. What about you? And, well, it's pretty clear. Israel hasn't been fairly at all sincere with God. And that's been from almost square one. Anything else on that? Well, verse 4 continues this idea of this roaring lion. God is this roaring, devouring lion. So that's how it concludes there in the last couple verses, 7 and 8 of this chunk. But right, it's a series of rhetorical questions, right? You know what the answer is, right? Does a lion roar in the forest when it has no prey? No. Does a young lion growl from its lair unless it has captured something? And just go down the list. The entire point is, well, yeah, there has to be prey. There has to be something. All right? And it's just interesting. It seems God in this book is really this lion. That's the point. It's I guess, a huge picture in the book is Amos sees God as this lion that's ready to pounce. And the questions here, all these rhetorical questions, are answered in 7 and 8. Because it makes it clear that God has spoken. Therefore, his prophet must prophesy. Right? And it ties that directly back to the lion roaring. Or even chapter 1, verse 2. The Lord roars from Zion. A lion has roared, who will not fear? The Lord has spoken. Who will not prophesy? See, I think this is ultimately Amos defending why he's speaking, especially when you read it in light of chapter 7. Obviously, people question, why is this sheep breeder from Judah up here in Israel talking at us? Well, Amos makes it pretty clear. God spoke. Therefore, I must speak. God has roared. God has given his command. I have no choice but to prophesy. And here we are. The Lord's revealed something, and Amos is going to tell the people. And this all ties back to that lion's roar. And God is speaking, and this is a big part of all these questions, right? They're all violent images of trapping and ensnaring, and, well, killing, God's roaring because his prey is ready to be devoured. And his prophet is just letting them know what's happening. Anything on that whole deal? If not, we will roll right on. So can I get somebody to read 9 through 11?
Proclaim on the citadels in Ashdod and on the citadels in the land of Egypt, and say, Assemble yourselves on the mountains of Samaria, and see the great tumults within her, and the oppressions in her midst. But they do not know how to do what is right, declares the Lord. These who hoard up violence and devastation in their citadels. Therefore, thus says the Lord God, an enemy, even one surrounding the land, will pull down your strength from you, and your citadels will be looted.
So 9 through 11 are this call out actually to other nations to watch what's about to happen. Primarily Philistia and Egypt here. And says, look, they're going to be destroyed. Watch. They're incapable. I mean, God doesn't say they haven't done it. He says they can't even do it. They don't even have the ability to do what's right anymore. And that's the Lord's declaration. Those who store up violence and destruction in their citadels. He's saying, look, nations, watch. These were my chosen people. And I will destroy them. An enemy will surround the land, and he will destroy your strongholds and plunder your citadels. Now, we ultimately know that as Assyria. And historically speaking, this happens. Israel is destroyed ultimately by Assyria. Assyria comes in, wipes them out, gathers what's left of them together, and shoots them out to the rest of the world in exile. The nation of Israel is never the same. As far as a political power the way it was at this time, doesn't happen again. The remnant of Judah gets to return from their exile, but this remnant of Israel is what we call the diaspora.
There's so much irony and progress, I guess, in the way the prophet's right. He's just gone through those 7 nations that God is going to destroy with 4 sins. Philistia is definitely listed. He's also talked about God has rescued them and brought them out of Egypt. He saved them from Egypt. So Egypt should be certainly condemned by God. Philistia should certainly be condemned by God. If they're going to watch Israel and destroy it, they will ultimately be destroyed if God said they would, but Israel goes first.
Yeah, you're right. The prophets are full of irony, and it's mocking language, really. God's poking fun at them. He's making a little bit of fun of them. Because he's like, look, I'm destroying you. And look who gets to watch. I said, it's Egypt, your historical oppressor that I saved you from. They get to watch. It's Philistia, this nation you've struggled and battled with throughout your entire history. I mean, they had Goliath. And they get to watch. It's bad.
I didn't think about it until verse 11 that all of this really serves as a warning for them to get out. I mean, like, this is coming, here's a warning. That when it said that you're going to be surrounded, it just kind of caught me off guard that, it's been a rebuke, this is why, but it's also like, hey, heads up, this is your, and it's almost like God is helping them once again that, if you're faithful and you want to leave, you might want to because this is going to be bad. That's what I saw that.
Yeah, because, I mean, look, God's not, when God says these things, the point of this, right? Like, what is the point of judgment here? Correction. He's not judging them to just try to wipe them out because he's mad and upset. He's actually telling them these things, trying to do these things to get them to go back to him actually ends up being a part of, well, something we're going to read here in a little bit, maybe. But the point of judgment is to get them to come back to Him. He's not judging them just because they failed. He's judging them because He's trying to get them to stop failing, to rebuild their relationship with Him. But He's just, so He has to dole out the punishment for their sins. But in doing that, He is trying to guide them back to Him. If the point is, life with me looks like this. None of this judgment and all these awful, horrible things. Life without me looks like that, though. Looks like being surrounded by Assyria.
One more, if you don't mind. It reminds me of, my brain says it's in Thessalonians when there's verses about end of time, end of the world, whatever, and these warnings, and being applied towards 70 AD and the destruction of Jerusalem, like, you need to get out. This is going to be bad, you know, and that there's actually a warning for them not the time to not be there.
God gives warning before judgment all the time. Even for ultimate judgment, He's given us a warning. The question is, will you heed it? Jeff?
It's like you have a smoke detector or your house is burning up and you take the batteries out. That's what it's
Yeah, in this, Amos is the smoke detector and they're trying to pull the batteries out. They don't want to hear it while the house burns down. The house is already burning down. I don't need the loud noise too. Okay, anything, Patrick?
Well, I mean, this is kind of a preview of chapter 4, because he's going to talk in chapter 4 about all of these warnings that he had sent them already, and they hadn't listened to, right? And so you ultimately end up in chapter 5, and the whole point is seek me and live, right? That's what he's getting at. So all of this is kind of moving in that direction, where you need to pay attention to the warnings. I sent you warnings that you haven't paid attention to. If you'll pay attention this time, seek me and live. And, well, we know the end of the story, because in 702 or whatever it is, or 722, I forget the dates.
Mhm.
722, is that right?
I think that's, yeah.
Anyway, Assyria is going to end up destroying me. So they never seek the Lord and live. And this constant repetition of their insistence on Bethel, and they end up talking about Gilgal, right?
Mhm.
They, again, back to, we want to do religion our way. They're they think they're worshiping Jehovah or Yahweh, right?
Mm.
They just think that they do it with the golden calf and with their priesthood and their calendar and all of that kind of stuff. They're never saying we're not worshiping Yahweh or we're not worshiping Jehovah. We're just doing it our way, right? So here's our calf, here's our priesthood, all of that kind of stuff. Oh, but hey, here's some God from Tyre. Hey, we'll worship him too. Or here's some God from Assyria. We'll worship him too. But they never let loose of Jehovah. They still think they're worshiping him, right? But they're just doing it their way.
Which isn't the agreement to terms.
And we have that same problem today, and Israel kind of got into that once saved, always saved mentality, right? God saved us, so there must not be anything wrong with us. And if everybody else would get their act together, then everything would be fine. They just leave us alone, because we know what we're doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're right. I mean, they wanted to do it their way. That's the fundamental problem with Israel. Kind of why He picked them. They're stubborn. They want it their way, and it's no terms were agreed to, at least as far as Israel's concerned, and they fail at it. And God issues warnings. The question is, are they actually going to come back?
A New Testament example, which is certainly one from us, in Matthew 23, verse 37 through 38, Christ says, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, who kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to her. How often I want to gather your children together, as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, and you were not willing. Behold, your house
Mhm.
Of course, it continues to grow back. But the judgment had been made.
Mm.
And Christ said very emphatically, it wasn't, maybe it'll be destroyed, maybe it won't. It was, it's done, it's destined. But he gives the opportunity for repentance and salvation, even beyond that point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, especially what you brought up there in Luke, like that whole idea of how they've treated their prophets, which I think is very relevant here to Amos, right? Like it's once you hit Amos chapter 7 and some things like, guys, no prophet does this because they like it. I'm gonna be honest. It's actually very dangerous and gets them killed a lot. Amos isn't speaking this because it's a cushy job that's going to make him money and keep him safe. Probably the exact opposite of that. It's probably going to get him killed. It's what happens to prophets. Israel tends to kill them. Because, well, they tend to talk about judgment. And they look at these people. And guess what? This is what good teaching, good preaching does too. They look at people and they say, hey, maybe you have a problem. No, not even maybe. You have a problem. And there's somebody who can help you get there, fix it. The question is, are you going to respond? Anything else on that little chunk? Well, verse 12. Can I get somebody to read that for me?
Thus saith the Lord, as the shepherd taketh out of the mouth of the lion 2 legs, or a piece of an ear, so shall the children of Israel be taken out that dwell in Samaria, in the corner of the bed, and in Damascus in the couch.
So, this verse shows the results of the destruction. All right? It's going to be like a shepherd taking 2 legs out of a lion's mouth or a piece of an ear. Question, if he's pulling 2 legs or a piece of an ear out of that lion's mouth, is that sheep alive? No. That thing has been torn to pieces. It has been shredded. And he's saying, that's what it's going to be like. Pieces of you will remain, and that is it. The lion will devour. But there's 2 things here I want to highlight about this judgment that I think are very important. Look, Amos, for a huge chunk of it, seems pretty, I guess, bleak as far as its judgment. I mean, it's pretty stark terms of you're going to be devoured and destroyed. I think there's hope here. And I think there's 2 primary things just to look at. First, we kind of touched on this, right? Israel's going to be torn to pieces. Parts of them will remain, though. I think that's kind of the point. The 2 legs you can pull out in the chunk of an ear, it ain't much, but it's there. But what pulls them out of that lion's mouth? It's a shepherd. I think that's the more important point here. A shepherd goes and retrieves these pieces of the sheep from the clutches and the jaws of a lion in death. While they have been devoured, while they have been destroyed, there is still hope for maybe some kind of resurrection, something to pull out of this. And ultimately, the shepherd that can raise the sheep back to new life. Look with me, John chapter 10. John 10. We'll be in verse 11 here in just a moment. Obviously, I think, hopefully, you've followed me through this a little bit. I'm referring to Jesus, because this is something Jesus calls himself, this a good shepherd. And I think it ties directly here, Amos 3:12. I try to read at least the Old Testament with Christ in mind, because it all points to him, and I think Amos 3:12, the Minor Prophets, does a huge job in that. So, can you look with me, John chapter 10, we'll start in verse 11. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. The hired hand, since he is not the shepherd, and doesn't own the sheep, leaves them and runs away when he sees a wolf coming. The wolf snatches and scatters them. This happens because he is a hired hand and doesn't care about the sheep. I am the good shepherd. I know my own, and my own know me, just as the Father knows me. And I know the Father. I lay down my life for the sheep. But I have other sheep that are not from this sheep pen. I must bring them also. They will listen to my voice. Then there will be one flock, one shepherd. This is why the Father loves me, because I lay down my life so that I may take it up again. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down on my own. I have the right to lay it down, and I have the right to take it up again. I have received this command from my Father. A good shepherd who lays down his life for that sheep. A sheep that was, well, not scattered in the same way, at least in John 10, but scattered. Israel has hope here. Now, it's bleak, it seems, for them in the immediate context. They are taken, destroyed, and scattered out by Assyria. But a Savior does come. It's a shepherd who lays down his life because it's his to lay down. But it's also his to take up again. It's death and resurrection. And it's what that shepherd ultimately does. Because Christ Jesus lays down his life on the cross and 3 days later rises again. And I think Amos is pointing forward to that, this saving shepherd. Jeff.
Well, at Pentecost, the church was created out of the scattered sheep that would come back to worship.
Scattered sheep at Pentecost, yeah. Any comments, anything on this? Well, I think that is a good stopping point for us this morning. We only got like a minute left. So thank you for the attention and everything. We'll pick up in Amos 3 next week.